welcome to unPlanned, the show about cities and how they work. I'm Sam, your host. Remember to hit the subscribe button. And today on unPlanned, we're going to look at a very interesting organization here in the Boston area, and the person who has just started out in the last couple of months as the new executive director over there. The organization we're talking about is the Sasaki Foundation, and the person who is going to tell us all about it is none other than Jen Lawrence. Jen, welcome to unPlanned.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. And we were talking before the show about the Sasaki Foundation, which is where you've just started a couple of months ago, I believe. Why don't you sort of kick us off by just helping us understand what is the Sasaki Foundation?
Yeah.
What is Sasaki, the firm that the foundation is connected to? And then we'll get into a little bit more about what the foundation is trying to do and a little bit more about you and your background and all that. But let's hear about the Sasaki Foundation Day.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. We're so excited. You can also subscribe to Sasaki Foundation on any of the social media platforms.
Because we love social media.
We love social media. So Sasaki Foundation is the charitable arm of Sasaki, the design firm. And Sasaki is a large firm. We were in Watertown until a couple of years ago, and now we're just about to open our new Boston office. So we're very excited about that. Right. Now, the foundation was founded about 20 years ago, and it's in the name of Hideo Sasaki, who founded Sasaki, the firm. Right. And he was he believed very firmly in interdisciplinary design and also in designing with communities. So the foundation is the mechanism for the firm to be able to continue that work. And so the work that we do revolves around really 3 different kinds of programs. We do research and experimentation. So we have design grants, actually just closed today. So on May 25th, you can join us at the new Lamplighter at Cambridge Crossing. We'll be there, and we'll be hearing from the finalists for those grants. I'll talk more about those later. Yeah. We also have public programming. Right. And really what we do there, and it's community engagement based, is host lots of panel discussions, meetups. Now that we're back in person, we can actually gather together and talk about these issues of design and inequity in design. And then we also have youth programming, which is really what we call the professional practice and growing that practice. And our youth programming is everything from middle school to high school internships to vacation groups and things like that. Right.
Now there's a lot in what you just described to us, and I am aware of the design grants. They're wonderful, and I'm interested to hear more, and particularly that you'll then do a public presentation, it sounds like, where people will get up and maybe pitch their design for their design grant. But let's start maybe with the last in that list first, which is the equity and diversity component, and the sort of commitment to make sure that planning and design decisions are made by a broad group of people across our communities. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about what that's all about and where it comes from? What's the impetus for it?
Yeah, absolutely. So our motto is that design belongs in and to all of us. And so really what we are working to do is to overcome the systemic barriers to access to that design that we have seen for generations before now, and that we are still seeing today. Right. And so a big program that we are working on to do that through is our youth programming. Right. And so we are hosting internships through the summers. For this year, it will be 12 young people in person. We're so excited to be in person again. Right. And really to start early. So we're looking at 9th, 10th, 11th grade for students to understand what is design. So these young people get full-time paid jobs for the summer with Sasaki Foundation, and they get to learn from principals and associates at Sasaki, the firm, about all aspects of design. And then from there, they can make a little bit more of an informed decision about whether or not they want to go into the field. We're not trying to turn every young person into a designer of some sort, but we do want them to know it's a possibility. Right. So that's really our biggest program that we're working on with that.
And it sounds like that's what you're in the middle of right now.
Now.
That's one of the things you're in the middle of right now.
Yeah.
that does sound very interesting, and let's just spend a second more on this notion, because it's of course a very important notion, and we'll get into some of your background before you were at the Sasaki Foundation. But in any public decision-making process, particularly around design decisions, unless you're actively a participant, either as a community member or as one of the design team, it feels as though that's all done over there by those people, and I have no real sense, and I'm not really sure how I could input that.
Yeah.
That, of course, gets even more complicated when you add in race, socioeconomic factors, et cetera, into that conversation. So it sounds like you're really trying to grapple with some of those, that the foundation is trying to grapple with some of those issues, and just to broaden that conversation out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the pieces that we're specifically with our youth programming trying to impact this year is we have been working with, for example, the BPDA in Boston.
Why don't you tell people exactly what that is?
The
because
Boston,
it used to go by a different name.
It used to go by a different name, the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And it's basically the planning department for the city. Yeah. And there are some amazingly wonderful folks there. And they have been working on this whole initiative to get young people to understand how they can engage with processes. So on a very minor level, we've been working with them to host some classes at high schools in Boston, so that young people know how they can become engaged, but even so that young people know that this is a thing you can engage in. All of a sudden there's this plan and you're like, well, how did that happen? Right. And so that's one very small thing we've been working on. Another thing we've been working on is trying to figure out, we're not even trying to figure out, just an outcome of our summer program would be amazing if young people became more aware of what was going on in their neighborhood, because they feel welcomed in to give feedback on something. And so, for example, this summer, we're going to do site visits with the Boston Planning Department. I'll just say it that way because it's easier to remember than the full acronym. So that way, these planners can hear directly from young people, and those young people can give their feedback to the planning department. That said, that doesn't fix the systemic issues, the issues of who feels welcome at a community meeting, who feels that they can even give feedback, the manners in which we are accepting feedback. Right. Those things are a much bigger issue that needs to be worked on in the field in general, but also, regionally.
It brings up so many thoughts. The one is just a comment that I'll make, that when I was studying planning about 20 years ago now, plus or minus, a planner was a white male in his 40s or 50s who wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt. And that literally was my impression of what a planner was and the types of people who went into the planning profession. Mm-hmm. I think that's gotten a lot better now, in the sense it's much more diverse. And it seems much more, for lack of another term, sort of a sexier field for people, that it's actually a place in which you feel you might be able to make a real impact on the world that you live in. But back then it was these sort of slightly nerdy guys who were just in the planning office down the hall over there. Yeah. So that's I would say, a huge improvement. Talk a little bit about how the foundation is related to the firm. Yeah. Because that does also sound very interesting in terms of the wonderful people, and we can obviously mention a few, but the people who work at Sasaki, how do you relate to them? Yeah. So how does that all work then?
That's such a good question. It's a really cool model, and Sasaki is very lucky to have the capacity to be able to do this. Right. And so the way it works is the foundation itself is a very small staff. There are 2 of us. We're working on trying to figure out if we need more capacity down the line, but for now, there's 2 of us. We do the day-to-day operations of a nonprofit, and we do the logistical maneuvering and the meetings with our partners to try to grow those partnerships and collaborations. And then as we've gotten a program ready to be launched for the year, for example, right now we have our summer exploratory experience and design, which is the SEED program, that we need 18 planners, architects, designers, strategists, technologists, whomever, to come and work with us this summer. And so we put a call out to the firm and we say, who is interested and has capacity this summer to give us a week of your time? And a week of your time is not a full workload. It's 6 to 8 hours. And those folks will then get in touch if they're interested. And the way that Sasaki does this is that we have volunteer time off, like a lot of firms do, and that you can get paid to volunteer for a nonprofit, which could be us, it could be anybody else. And then we also have, in a very logistical manner, in our timesheet, you can put time onto the foundation, and the firm will pay for that time on behalf of the foundation.
So in that sense, you can tap into all these wonderful people who are working at Sasaki for the projects and the things that you're trying to accomplish, particularly with these young people. I can't imagine a more wonderful way to spend a summer and a more eye-opening way to spend a summer as a teenager than to be exposed to all this incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And, I can say that I am a quasi-expert in urban planning because that's what I've been doing for most of my career. I am not a technologist. I am not an architect. I am not any of those other things. So I could come for the week where they're learning about how do you do a community-led process.
Right.
I couldn't do the other things. And so having this entire firm to be able to call upon is really powerful. Plus, our young people are very diverse. It's an amazing group of people. So when you see people that look like yourself, right, it's amazing. It's so powerful. It's a really cool experience.
It sounds wonderful. Now let's talk about the design grants and the types of projects that you grapple with. Because if you go to the website again or look at their strategic plan, I mean, it's amazing the kind of stuff that people are working on. So what would be some examples of maybe some of the types of grants that you might fund, or the people, even the proposals that you're going to review in a month or so?
Yeah.
How does all that work?
That's a great question. So just today, we closed our grant cycle for this year for applications, which is just wonderful. And we've gotten a lot of really cool stuff. So the way that our grants work is that we ask people to propose ideas for their community, and it has to be community-led. It cannot be academic-led or planner-led. It needs to be from the community. And we ask for applications to address a series of issues that we all have in our communities. It could be housing, it could be transportation innovation, it could be public health, it could be climate change resiliency or placekeeping. And we ask them to come up with an idea or tell us the idea that they've already come up with years ago. They get to, if they win, they get funding for up to $15,000, depending on what they need. They also get access to our designers. So we have been really, I don't know what the word is, I guess, open and just really let them decide what that time with the designers means. So for somebody, it might be that they need a piece of software written for them. For somebody, it might be they need a drawing to take this idea they have from the community to put it on paper. So they'll have this time. They'll work with us for about 9 months. And then at the end of it, they'll have a product that they can then continue on with, or a finished thing, which is really cool. And the last thing about that is that it's a team project. So teams can be completely made up of just your organization. If you're a community-led group in your community, and that's great. It could also be a multidisciplinary team from a university and a city and 2 different nonprofits. So it's really cool. Some of the stuff we funded before, if folks have seen in Cambridge, the Charles River Floating Wetland.
Right.
Part of that was funded.
Which we actually talked to the Conservancy.
Did you?
We talked to the
Good.
Conservancy, and we actually went to see the wetland as well.
It's so cool.
So you all funded that.
That was a Sasaki.
That's wonderful.
I mean, a very small piece of it because
Sure.
it was a big project.
Yeah.
But we did that. And actually, when I was at the city of Cambridge, one of my projects was working on that
Well,
program.
we're going to get to the city of Cambridge in a second. But yeah, and some other ones. There was one about, I saw on the website, I don't have it in front of me, gender on Columbia Rise.
Yes,
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, that one is really cool. They actually just came out with, that was the Livable Streets Alliance. And they just came up with their gender and mobility handbook. And it's all about how, navigating through streets and how it's different based on your gender.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool booklet. People should check it out. Again, social media. It's on our social media if you want to see it. But you could go right to the Livable Streets Alliance too and find that.
Yeah, and I mean, just wonderful. Very interesting. Now, it sounds as though most or if not all of these projects are Boston region specific. Is that correct?
It tends to be Boston region specific. It can be any greater Boston community organization or community group, as well as the gateway cities in Massachusetts. Because, and I don't remember if we mentioned this before, but Sasaki has a foundation, and not a foundation as in a nonprofit,
right.
but a base, I guess,
yeah.
in Boston, in newly announced New York. We just announced it yesterday.
I saw that.
And Denver.
On your social media.
On our social media. In Denver and also in Shanghai. So we don't yet have a presence of the foundation in those other communities.
Right.
But
imagine what your workload would be.
I think we'll need some more staff
if you had
that.
Shanghai, New York,
and
Boston.
It would be a 24-hour a day job for sure.
You had mentioned earlier before we started that the goal isn't to turn everybody into an urban planner necessarily. And that maybe, but you might be interested in the field in the sense that you want to work in the construction trades or something like that. I was joking that, I'm too old for this now, but they look like what an incredible job, and what an incredible job to get a good paying job that is wonderful. And I had a friend many years ago who was working with a laborers union, and they were driving around Boston, and this craggy old guy from the laborers union, as they're driving through Boston, was just pointing at buildings and bridges and said, I built that, I built that, I built that. And I always thought, what an amazing legacy from a lifetime that you can say, you can look in the city you live in and say, actually, I built a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, my hands were on that.
Exactly.
I think that's a really good point because, and I was saying this earlier, it is really important to folks to know that we're not trying to push all young people to college. That's not that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is open up the avenue of possibilities. So if you come through our internship and you realize, I love this field, but I want to be physically building this stuff. We partner with so many different organizations, and that will move you there.
Because a friend of mine is now living in central Massachusetts, there's nothing quite like being outdoors, working with your hands. Mm-hmm. It's so refreshing, therapeutic. I don't know what the right term is, but it's wonderful. So I fully appreciate that. There's obviously a lot more we can say about this. I will get all your social media connections at the end of this discussion, but I now want to switch to your life before you were the executive director. Tell us, what were you doing, and what was the job, and what was the title, and what kinds of things were you working on? Because it's also equally interesting. It's different. It's different, related, but different line of work in a way. But what were you up to before you were there?
Absolutely. So before this, up until very recently, I was at the City of Cambridge in the Community Development Department as a sustainability planner.
And what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah. It was a name we made up, a title we made up. I was the first person to have that role. And I think we've actually changed it now. The new person has a different title, which is great. So basically, I was tasked with engaging the community in our work that had to do with sustainable transportation and climate change, everything climate change related, in the planning department. Right. So it was a lot of collaborations. It was a lot of building relationships, a lot of communication, and it was really, really meaningful. It was an awesome job.
Give us some examples or some specifics so we can kind of get our minds around, well, what does that mean? Because I think obviously it's topic number one. Well, there are many topic number ones these days, but it is, without planet Earth, right? We're not here either. So how did you define it? How was it being defined? What were some of the pushes and pulls in the discussions, and ways in which you felt it was effectively being implemented, and things you would have maybe done?
So I think one of the, this is very related too. Yeah. One of the projects that I'm most proud of is working with our young people. Right. And so what we were seeing at community meeting after community meeting, which we can go into a whole other podcast about what methods of gathering feedback from the community are the most effective. And community meetings may not be that. And I would go out to say that it's probably not where you're going to get the most feedback.
And we're just going to pause there for a second. When you say community meeting, you mean the physical, we're all in a room together. We called the meeting for 7 p.m. and
then we discussed something.
Right.
And I think for that, if I was in high school, I would never go to that. Right. But also, it doesn't feel safe to a lot of people. It doesn't feel welcoming. People don't know what's happening. People don't have the time to get there or the capacity to be there. Zoom has changed that for sure, but it's still not really the
Well, I was going to ask you in the Sasaki discussion about technology. I mean, is that an area that you've looked at from the foundation, maybe as one of these grants, of the impact in technology, maybe just in the communication side of it? Because there's so much to talk about.
There's so much to talk about. We actually, I can't say who applied to what yet because they just came in, but I saw a bunch of technology ones come in. So I don't have an answer right now, but I'm hopeful that in 6 months we will.
Yes.
We're really looking at it.
Yeah. But there you were, City of Cambridge, and go on. So
working with young people.
Right.
So really what we started doing was hosting summer jobs. Right. And we said, young people don't even know that the community development department exists because why would you if you're a high school student? Right. And so this was specifically high school. We hosted between, our first year, I think was like 4 high school interns. And then by the last year that I was there, I think we had 45.
And can I ask, because we're unplanned is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Are these Cambridge Rindge and Latin?
A lot of them are Cambridge Rindge and Latin, but we were funded through the mayor's program, which is the youth employment program for the city of Cambridge. Wonderful program.
Absolutely
love them. They're
Is it true? We're digressing a little bit. Anybody who wants a job through the Mayor's Summer Youth Program can get a job. So
I don't know if that's true or not. I have never seen anybody not get a job through it. So I would.
But it basically means if you're a teenager at Rindge and Latin, I think, or just anywhere.
Anywhere in Cambridge.
Cambridge, you can get a summer job, which has so many benefits.
Oh my gosh.
We can't even start that conversation.
It's phenomenal. So I love that program. Right. And actually we're going to be a site this summer in Sasaki, so in Boston. So you don't just have to be a Cambridge site. So if anybody is a nonprofit person or whatever, you can apply to be a site. Wonderful. It's amazing. So by the end we had 45 students, and those students, what we would do is learn all about planning. So you got to work on specific projects that we were working on. Teenagers. So these teenagers came up with amazing ideas for how to do outreach around energy efficiency upgrades, or there's a transportation project happening and we need to get feedback from so-and-so in the neighborhood. They came up with the ideas for how to do it.
Here's a lesson to everybody. Don't ask a craggy old guy to solve that. Ask like a teenager.
Yes.
Because they will be creative and they will think about the world. As we all know, it's the age-old story, but they will think about the world in ways somebody like me would just not even consider.
And on that note, the other project that we then started partnering with was with EF, Education First.
Right.
This program called the EF Global Challenge, and it was us, our department, EF.
Did you say global?
Global, as in global and local together. And so students would, through their school day, they got time out of school to come and figure out what their ideas would be. We would give them a challenge every year. And then those students would come back to us with these amazing ideas. So one year it was communicating climate change. And this stuff they came up with, they created a superhero. They created an amazing 90-foot mural that they put in Danahy Park for the entire summer and stood out there talking to people about what it meant.
Wow.
Amazing stuff to communicate the reality of climate change in Cambridge. So that's a global challenge with a local implication. So those were some of the ways that we engaged with young people.
Right. So to wrap up our conversation, obviously we could talk for a while about this stuff. What's your assessment overall? So you were at the City of Cambridge, you were working on these issues there. Now you're at the foundation. What do you think we've figured out, and what do you think we still need to work on?
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, in all of these areas that we've covered.
Yeah, I think as really straining and miserable for a lot of people the pandemic has been, and for small businesses and everything, we learned technology in a way that I don't think we would have learned.
Yeah.
And so access to things has become much better, I think.
Yeah.
I think we figured out that, getting people to give us feedback on a neighborhood plan on a survey is not a bad idea. That has been really powerful. Or offering up a city council meeting over Zoom. Yeah. So you can actually jump between things, feed the kids, do whatever you're doing, and still have it on has been really, really wonderful. For me personally, as a city planner during that time, it was nice to be able to attend a meeting from my house.
Yeah.
And not have to physically get there.
Yeah.
I think the things that we're still not doing well, and I mean this in the entire field. I'm not just saying city planning. I mean design, architecture, everything is how to meaningfully engage the public and to invite people and give agency to people. And the foundation is really focused on that. How do we give agency to communities?
I'm gonna kick off another episode right here with this question, but there is a debate, and I think it's one of the very interesting parts of the history of urban planning. Yep. And people will not like me for saying this, but to give neighborhood groups or just an absolute veto over this or that is also not planning. How should we start to think about that? Because I've thought about that in my past work, and you recognize that sometimes we're not as bold as we could be or potentially should be because we're just trying to placate. And just to give you a tough one as we close out this discussion, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, this is I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this. So this is a really good one. And I'm not talking about any of my past official experience at all. No. Just my lived experience, and I've got multiple answers. So one is, I think it's probably time we start reevaluating what we call planning. Right. Because we're really not doing justice to our communities by not engaging. At the same time, I say emphatically, just because you're the loudest voice does not mean your voice has to matter more than anybody else. Right. And so I really do think what I was starting to, or what I ended with right before you asked this question was giving agency to people. Right. And I think that is that we do not value certain voices as much as we do others. And that's not going to help us get anywhere. It's not going to help us get anywhere in design, architecture, community planning, urban design, any of that. Because we're not valuing everybody the way that they should be valued. So there's two sides of it, right? We need to figure out how to better balance that. And equity does not mean equality at all. Right. And we also need to probably rethink how we define urban planning. Right.
And just to repeat something we were talking about earlier, that it is a fundamental commitment of the foundation, at least as stated in their documents, and I believe it to be true, and I assume of the firm as well, that we grapple with societal problems through design. It's not the only mechanism we have, but it certainly is a mechanism that we have.
It is a great mechanism, and I do think that while we're very small and we're trying our hardest as a very small nonprofit, we need to partner more with lots and lots of organizations and firms, and we're working on that. Our design grants are really the model we're trying to push forward with that, in that you are a community group. You have community voice. Maybe you weren't listened to by the city. I don't know. Maybe you were. You've got a great idea for how to grapple with one small idea, one small problem, challenge, whatever it might be in your neighborhood. And you just need a little bit of people time, right? You got to pay for your people. Right. And because our time is very valuable. Right. And then you need some design expertise behind you. And if we can scale that, then we might be able to make a bigger difference in this and give more people voice and agency. That's what we're hoping for, at least. Yeah.
Jen Lawrence, Tufts grad, right? You went to UEP?
I did. I went to UEP. Yeah, almost 20 years ago now, which is just mind-boggling.
Dare I call you all a mafia in the local planning?
There are quite a few of us.
Yeah, but they're all wonderful people, all wonderful human beings. Quickly, where would somebody go to find out more about?
Great question. So you can find us on YouTube at Sasaki Foundation. Right. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Sasaki FDN.
Okay, so that's where you go. Jen Lawrence, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Yeah.